All right. I think we'll just kick off now. Thanks, Jenny, Arka, and the others for joining in. At any point of time, feel free to ask questions. Just type it in the chat window. I will try and answer it at any point of time as you pop up. In case I can't answer, I do promise to get back to you at the earliest. Can I get a thumbs up that you're able to see my screen? Thanks, Arya. All right, so thank you all once again and welcome to the session. We're going to talk about combating digital fraud. The way I've planned this session is there are a few slides, and along with the few slides, there are a few questions that we want to ask you and get your opinion on and talk about that. It may seem like a presentation session, but if you know at any point of time, feel free to just type in a question in the chat window to ask questions, as well as at a point of time on any slide, if you do have a thought, just let me know, and I'll be happy to unmute you, and so that you can unmute yourself and speak about that as well. So just quickly about myself, my name is Snehashis, so I head the APAC data partnerships for APAC and EMEA data partnerships for TeleSign. Been with TeleSign for about a year and a half. Prior to that, I've had the experience of working across various industries, doing a startup fintech in India to leading the identity and pre-sales for Experian in Southeast Asia, and this role here. I'm extremely passionate about risk assessment and digital identity. That's something I'm very excited about. I love talking about it. Before that, just quickly wanted to give you all an overview about who we are and what we do. TeleSign, we were one of the first starters, as you may call it, in the world of two-factor authentication. We started off in 2005, headquartered in LA. Even till this date, TeleSign owns a lot of patents on two-factor authentication. Being one of the early starters had its advantages. Then the biggest advantage was we were able to drive how the market is going to evolve. So today, 21 of the top 25 online websites uses TeleSign for authentication for the purpose of verification. We do over 18 billion plus in traffic every year. Our two main portfolios of solutions is under communications and identity, and we'll get a bit about it in the next slide. We've been spreading our global footprint, as you can see. So our main product development center is in Belgrade. APAC office, we've just started a year and a half ago. I was the first employee. Today we've grown to a team size of 10, and we're scaling up the APAC region more. When you look at our solutions under the programmable communication and digital identity was actually a natural evolution from our programmable communication. So when we started off on our SMS messaging, sending OTPs for authenticating customers, over a period of time, customers wanted to also not only just restrict themselves of authenticating the user, but at the same time, they also wanted to check whether they can verify whether the customer coming on board is genuine or not. So besides just verifying the phone number, they want to understand the person behind the phone number. Is he really a certain person who claims to be or not? Is he really the one who is he a risky guy or a genuine guy? So that's how digital identity evolved sometime around 2012 is when we started exploring down that path. And using a combination of both our solutions, we are able to solve quite a few problems in the customer journey, albeit around KYC, preventing account takeover, reducing fake account, addressing promotion abuses on the e-commerce websites, driving user engagement, and so on and so forth. So today, any of the top online brands that you can think of rely on TeleSign. So, fraud. We all know what fraud is. We all have either faced it, if we've been unfortunate enough, but have definitely heard about fraud. And with the growing digital footprint that we have today, the problem is fraud is only going to increase day by day. If you see, it's today a $19 billion industry around the world, and it's only growing. It's probably, you could say, one of the fastest growing industries in the world, unfortunately. Some of the statistics that we've seen through surveys is, 50% businesses have seen an increase in fraud attempts over the last 12 months. Over 1 in 5 consumers, especially in the APAC region, have experienced fraud, either through a false stolen identity or through a transaction that they did not do, and things like their account getting hacked. But probably the point which is of a larger concern for the industry today is the figure that you see is $26 on the screen. Now, what's also happened over the course of the last 2 to 3 years is the average value of online transaction, the genuine transactions have actually come down. However, the average value of fraudulent transactions has grown up. So what has happened today, and one of the biggest contributing factors why fraud is growing is because not only the number of transactions have gone up, but the average value size of transactions have also shot up. When we look at APAC specifically, right? I mean, APAC region is blessed with the largest population, the biggest population chunk globally. And because of which, obviously, fraud is also, we contribute to 59% of the overall fraud. Now, there are reasons for that besides population. So one aspect of the reason is APAC is also the market where the smartphone and the internet boom has happened much later than North America, Europe, and even LATAM for that matter. So which is why today, if you see the internet user penetration in APAC is just 49%. So there is still a lot more users who are still to adopt and move to the online world. However, with more and more users coming to the online world, there are a lot of first-time users. And with first-time users, there is always followed by a lack of awareness and sometimes ignorance, which makes them easier targets for fraudsters to capture information from them and then do a fraud. In this region, and one of the outcomes of that has also been Indonesia, right? Because Indonesia has seen a big smartphone boom over the last few years. And as a result of which, I mean, today, Indonesia, unfortunately, is one of the highest globally on e-commerce fraud. 1 in 3 transactions in Indonesia are considered to be fraudulent. And it's closely followed by Philippines. Now, fraud is predominantly driven, we know, by stolen identity, promotion, misuse, and malicious intent. There is also a certain universe of consumers who actually want to get on board with a genuine intent to fraud the system. Now, why is also fraud growing? One question is, do businesses take fraud seriously, right? It was quite a startling revelation recently when, Experian did a survey, and when going through that survey, businesses today are focused more on driving revenue versus fraud generation. While, yes, driving revenue is very important, businesses talk about personalization, customization, making the user journey seamless. But somewhere along, a lot of businesses are not prioritizing the security aspect of fraud, security aspect of the customer experience. Now, that obviously creates a lot of fear in a lot of people who want to adopt and move to the digital world. If you see some of the factors here, right? If you see 16% drop, company says, because what people normally, businesses associate fraud checks with is, hey, it's going to impact my acquisition. It's going to impact my traffic. I'll have a lot of drop-offs in business, and that's why I don't want to do fraud. And you will be surprised to know there are businesses, not the bigger brands, but there are a lot of upcoming businesses today who do not even track fraud as a KPI, what's happening on the system. This is extremely a dangerous situation because if you don't look at fraud today and try and address fraud at the early part of your journeys, the bigger you become, the more customers you get, the more susceptible your consumers are onto the fraud. So that is one big area of concern which companies like TeleSign and us, we are trying to drive when we talk to enterprises. And a lot of our solutions are seamless, which means it does not necessarily impact the consumer, while at the same time it protects the consumer. Now, because of data hacks and data breaches, right, we have also seen that uh, there are instances of fraud, data being stolen, security systems being hacked, data being stolen, data being sold on the dark web, and those data can be bought from the dark web and then can be used by fraudsters to impersonify and carry out malicious transactions. So, question for you all. What do you think is the estimate of the number of data breaches that's happened between 2013 and 2019? So it's a poll. You, Alison, will send up if you could just give me your options. All right, we'll just run it for a couple of seconds more. Okay, interesting. I see some of the fluctuating results around the number, but I think most of the audience is getting there. All right, so it's interesting, and I think the results are interesting. 50% of the audience, if you claim and say that it's 14 billion, and another 33% talk about 20 billion. The answer is correct. The answer is 14 billion records. And so, between 2013, and that's really double the size of the population that we have. So, which means accounts and multiple accounts have been hacked. And so, which means today fraudsters, and a lot of this data, by the way, is getting sold on dark web. You have companies like Spy Cloud, which have access to these information, which are selling these services in the dark web today. And which of the companies have got hacked? So it's not necessarily the startups or the small enterprise. If you see on the right, you see some of the big brands that have been impacted because of fraud. So you have the big brands like Equifax, eBay's of the world, the Adobe's, JP Morgan, where data has been breached. So it's a scary situation, and which is all the more reason why, because there are data breaches happen, fraudsters always making an attempt. It's all the more reason why businesses need to invest a lot more on the fraud solutions, because if you're able to give consumers a safer experience, they are more likely to stick on to you, recommend you, and come to your network. Now, fraudsters today are getting very smart, right? And one of the things I always like to say is it's like a cat and mouse game between fraudsters and technology. And unfortunately, fraudsters most of the times manage to keep a step ahead, and businesses are always trying to play a catch-up game. Now, there are different ways frauds happen, right? So there are, as you can see, identity theft is also known as payment fraud. This is probably one of the most common frauds. 70% of all attacks are identity theft on the e-commerce side. It's part of the majority of the methods used by cyber criminals today, either as an end goal, which is fraudulently doing a transaction, or a precursor to another attack, which is a very classic case of a voice phishing call, where you get a call to say, I'm calling from your bank and we've sent you a 4-digit code and please send this. And somebody's done a transaction, stolen your identity and done a transaction on your behalf. In this kind of fraudsters also use email accounts, user account names, IPs, addresses, to make it seem like a real customer and create a replica identity of you as a user. The other fraud is clean fraud. Clean fraud is a little tricky, because for businesses, clean fraud sometimes become difficult to detect because they seem legitimate on the face of it. What happens in these kind of transactions is it's purely happening through a stolen credit card. So as a user, as a business, a lot of times, because of the journey is going fine, you do not realize that probably this is a fraudulent transaction. A lot of times it's a flag off done at the end of the transaction for the businesses. Friendly fraud, nothing very friendly about it. Friendly fraud is typically, it's a classic case of users coming in with an intent to fraud. So I go to a website, I purchase, I get the goods delivered, and then I call up the retailer to say that, hey, I didn't make that purchase. Somebody's stolen my details and done a purchase on my behalf. I lodge a complaint and I get a chargeback. So the money gets transferred back to me on my card. And obviously the business is a little lost. Triangulation fraud is another very common fraud which is coming up, and that's typically which is impacting businesses quite a lot. Like I said, fraudsters are getting smarter. They create replicas of big brands or websites. So somebody might create a replica of a Shopee, for example. As a consumer, when you're browsing the internet, you see a banner of something looking like a Shopee's website or XYZ brand's website with a great discount on a certain product. You click on it, you land on a portal which is genuinely same looking portal to that brand. You see a discounted product, you purchase it, you've entered your name, you've entered your phone number, you've entered your credit card details, everything CVV number that's required. And what you've essentially done is you've actually landed up on a fake website, entered willingly, but not knowingly, shared all your information with a fraudster. So obviously your card has not got charged yet. You would typically see either a transaction failure or something, but what you would see after a couple of days is there's a transaction that's happened on your card. Because this is how fraudsters are capturing details and information about you. And of course, besides that, there are the internal frauds, cyber hacks, and many, many frauds that's actually happening. Now, we spoke about businesses not wanting to invest so much on the side of building security, whereas we all like to go to websites which shows us very personalized information, which shows us, which is, where the UI is very good, very easy to handle. As a consumer, what do you think is primarily today the consumers seek when they go as part of their digital engagement? So do you think it's ease of use? Do you think it's security? You think it's privacy, or you think it's personalization? You would have a pop-up whole window on your screen. Because when we talk digital, we always talk about, hey, it has to be simple to use. A lot of times we have old people who are first-time users wanting to use, and they don't like very complicated websites. So, there's always that focus for businesses there. Okay, so we got all the participants who answered. Interesting. So we've got a tie between ease of use and security, which is A and B. Now, both are equally important, right? Because the last thing we want to do when we're on the digital site is to embrace and look at something which is complicated, right? However, when we interviewed consumers, right, one of the things that comes out very distinctly is consumers want security. That is of primary importance to the consumers. Consumers, what we've also seen are, 71% of the consumers felt that security is obviously most important. Convenience and personalization is good, but if I don't know my data is going to be secure on the internet or not, I would not go. Secondly, if you see consumers today, we talk about data privacy, we talk about data sharing. The other important thing that does come out in the survey was a lot of consumers, more than 50%, are willing to share their information with a brand, with a third party, if that translates into better security and more data protection for them. So that's what the consumer demand is, right? And this is where I think today businesses are failing. And this is where there is a dissonance, where the need for businesses to have good looking, ease of usage UIs, investing so much on personalization. Today you go to a big e-commerce brand website, they will look at what you've done in the past, what kind of purchases you've made. They'll try and populate those pages when you come back to kind of guide you to what they think you should purchase, right? However, security is an aspect that businesses are missing out on, and that's really important for big businesses to garner. I remember once speaking to an e-commerce startup in this region. They're pretty new. They're growing big, but pretty new. And they very clearly said, hey, we're not concerned about fraud. We want fraud to happen because at least that'll give us a lot of traffic. It'll give us a lot of traffic on our portal, and that's what we're looking for. And that is what is a very risky approach to business, because if you're building your business from scratch without a focus on fraud, you're actually exposing or causing a lot of threat to a lot of prospect customers who might come to your website and might want to and might get fleeced and might have their data stolen. So to make a successful digital engagement, it's very important to have something, obviously, which reduces friction. Definitely important, but definitely you need to improve your security so that the consumer experience is not just consumer experience is not just about a good UI, right? It's about security as well. End of the day, with something lowers their risk and their exposure when they're on your website trying to make a transaction. Now, businesses have different ways in which they can actually work to mitigate fraud and to address fraud. And the market is flooded with solutions for businesses to invest. So there are solutions which is based on mobile number based, to email, to IP based device, OCR biometrics. And there are a few more. I've just listed a few of them here. And there is obviously the adoption. There are businesses which are more complex businesses like banks, which want to use a combination of those three solutions. And that's why adding a layer of machine learning comes into picture, where they can consume multiple information to identify the potential risk. Now, obviously, every solution is good. Every solution has its merit. In the fraud ecosystem today, there is not one solution that can solve all problems. So for businesses, it's important to judge the solution versus the ROI. What is it they want to check? At what point of the journey they want to check? And based on which, they need to decide which solution to take. So a mobile number-based authentication is probably one of the easiest checks to do. So based on certain phone number signals, behavior, you can predict the guy who's coming in onto your network immediately and block a lot of traffic there. Emails, again, is another way. IPs can be sometimes tricky, but if you detect a lot of users coming into you from proxy IPs, those could be fraud indicators. And this device and biometrics definitely is the more evolved thing, but is also the most expensive thing. Also for businesses who rely a lot on biometric-based validation, they need to do also a lot of investment on their own data security, because you're actually storing a lot of consumer PI when you get a biometric-based validation. Now, what we've seen in the market today, right? And there are the traditional businesses. There was the traditional method of initially just doing an OTP first, and businesses would, for a new user and for a returning user, invest and ask them to enter a username password. Now that's changing. Now it's changing. There are the emerging businesses which are now migrating to, they've realized that MSISD-based validation is extremely important because a phone number, email IDs are very easy to create. I can sit on my desk as a fraudster, create 10, 15, 20 email IDs. Mobile number, there's still a lot of effort I need to do. I need to go to a store, falsify a document, and then get a SIM issued in my name. So based on an MSISD-based remutation to verify who the user is, if there's any risk signals that can come out of it, that's becoming very important. So people are adding those additional layers as they try and invest. Cost is effective. This can be done at a very early part of the journey, so helps prevent a lot of garbage to be filtered out at the early part of your digital journey, rather than addressing more expensive solutions towards the end. When you look at the advanced stages, and that's where you have biometrics, device, email-based checks, additionally, that's been added on top of the layer. Mind you, it's important to note what businesses are realizing. You cannot do away with the solution that you are using. So OTPs still do remain relevant, right, even after today. But businesses over a period of time are adding more and more security layers on top of what they have been doing, right? And that is being done to best way to mitigate fraud. But what businesses are also becoming smart for, and if you refer to the previous slide, they're using each service at different legs of the journey so that they make sure solutions which cost more probably might have a bigger impact come in later part of the journey. But if they could get solutions which can filter a lot of fraud in the early part of the journey, that's where a lot of investments are being made today. And that's where they start seeing quite immediate realizations on their ROI. So we'll have another quick poll here. So the question here is, what do you think? I mean, you have your own businesses that you run, we have different parameters. What do you want to do? What do you think is the most important for enterprises to validate this today? Okay, you've got a few answers. Would love the others to also vote. Somebody's voted for device finally. Okay, another 5 seconds to go and then. Okay, thanks. Great. I think this was a very tough fight between mobile number and email ID. Interestingly, biometrics and device came in quite late, quite the distance. You're right. And email ID and mobile number do become important. Mobile number still, there's been about 70% people voted for the mobile number. And you're right. And why is mobile number important, right? Mobile number is important because what businesses realize is email IDs are easy to create. I can create 10 of them sitting right now. While mobile number becomes the first point of contact for businesses when they are onboarding a customer. So it's your point of contact for sending OTPs. It's your point of contact for sending any promotional messages. It's your point of contact for sending any transaction updates. It's also when you have if you're into a lending business and if you want to do a collections follow-up, you need to know that the person is still using that phone number, right? So you want to reach out for follow-ups to defaulters. And hence phone number still remains what business are seeing. There was a point of time when business was slowly migrating and moving outside phone number checks to more of email ID and other alternate sets. But what they've realized is phone number still remains the critical one. So today, if you see businesses are building and accepting solutions, prioritizing the phone number validation first before going in for other checks. Now, it can be used in different parts of the journeys, and there could be different signals that we mentioned, like checking, in a markets like ours, we have a lot of prepaid consumers in the market. So there is always a phone number that is used, thrown away, taken up by someone else. It happened to me recently. I was trying to register my number on a website. It identified me as somebody else because that phone number probably was used by a different user who had thrown away the phone and not updated. Now that's a big security lapse, right? I could have actually logged into that person's system and seen a lot of personal information about that person. Now, recycle number check is a signal that can be used, which helps businesses address that, right? Which is on these prepaid numbers, on these phone numbers that's coming in for new registration to check whether this phone number was in use before, has there been a change of ownership? So in the example that I gave about myself, had there been an option for the business to check that this was recycled or not, that security lapse wouldn't have happened. The other important check is when you look at, yes, I got your point. Yes, stolen SIM cards is also a major concern in terrorism. You're very right. And SIM card, and that's why SIM swap. I think I'll break up into two parts: the SIM swap and the stolen SIM, right? And in a sense, both are related, but still a little different. Typically, what happens, by the way, the mechanism in which it happens is quite similar, because many times for a SIM swap fraud, it's really somebody has gone with a false document to a telco store to say, "I've lost my SIM, I need a new SIM," and there is somebody sitting in the operator space who's probably either intentionally or unintentionally has had a bit of lapse where the documents were not validated properly. It could be because the systems were not in place, or it could be for the person who was hand in glove with the fraudster. Either way, there's a SIM swap happen. So the moment a SIM swap happened, like Arga, you rightly said, it exposes you to a lot of other challenges. That phone can then be used for purpose of terrorism, yes. It can also be used for receiving OTPs. If I have your phone number, I'll get all the OTPs on this number. I can carry out transactions. So SIM swap check definitely is something businesses should do for preventing fraud, especially when there's a large online transaction happening. One important thing probably which is relevant for a lot of lenders is also age of number check, right? Which is to identify given a phone number. And again, it comes from the fact that these markets are predominantly your prepaid markets. It's very important to also understand how old or how new that phone is. So is this phone 2 months, 3 months old? Because those again becomes interesting indicators for you if you're making either a decision on fraud or you're making a decision to assess credit risk. In both cases, determining age of number is very helpful. KYC check is another important check, right? And there are certain limitations to it, obviously, because prepaid consumers data may not be validated, but there's still a postpaid base where the operators have done due diligence in validating this phone number belongs to so and so. So those are validated information. Besides that, there are a lot of government sources that can be validated based on phone number to really establish the user behind that particular phone number. That brings us to the last poll that we have for the day. And now we have spoken about these 4 characteristics. I mean, if you were to look at from your business or general, which of this do you think is probably the most important or something that should be done? And I'll be really glad if you can answer your questions. It was a very close competition, I can tell you. There is a lot of interesting, so a lot of multiple choices as well. Great. So, so ownership does seem to be a primary use case, I believe, and which is very right. I think a lot of our businesses, whether it's fintechs, whether it's banks, whether it's even online companies want to validate who the users are, right? So that seems to be the clear winner. But I think there is a lot of requirement and use case that people also believe that the recycle number check and the age of mobile number also comes. So it's basically D followed by B, A, and C, which seems relevant, and which is quite rightly so, because each of them have its own merit. Ownership definitely rules that because you're kind of validating who the user is. And the other 2 parameters are actually giving you indication about certain prospect fraud or not. Thank you for that. So at TeleSign, we're doing exactly that, right? So TeleSign, we work with opcos around the world, partnering with them to bring these important signals for your businesses to address fraud. So we offer solutions which get consumed by businesses across different use cases. So recycle number check is used for new account opening, is used for account takeovers. Collection, a lot of businesses use this for collections because, when you have certain high-risk customers, especially the first time eligible or due to pay you their EMIs, you want to check before the due date whether the phone number has been recycled or not, whether the ownership is still with the same user or not. And that point of time, if you see something is amiss and the user has not updated their contact number, the collections team can actually flag that off as a potential high risk and take corrective action much before it's too late. Similarly, on account opening, it just helps a much better user experience because, again, I go back to the example that I mentioned about me. It would have been so much better had I moved to a direct registration page instead of identifying me as a separate unit and taking me somewhere else. Number 8 check, again, it's very important in predominantly by fintechs and banks and the lending space to determine whether buy now pay later companies as well to associate the risk associated. SIM swap comes in handy at the point of payment. At the point of payment, you want to understand whether there's been a prospective account takeover, and you want to make sure you want to check that before you're actually sending an OTP. And again, KYC, I guess we overwhelmingly discussed. Jenny, recycle number means, I mean, just to reiterate, I got the question is, what happens is, I have a prepaid number, or I have a phone number. I have a mobile number. I stop using that mobile number. And after a certain period of time, I've disconnected that phone number. And I've bought a new phone number for myself. What operators will do is that phone number that I had previously will go into what we can call as a quarantine. It could be 30 days to 90 days, depending on the market and depending on the operator. It could be 30 days to 90 days. For 30 days to 90 days, that number is a deactivated number. But after that quarantine period, the number is back in the market as a fresh new number. So which means somebody else can go and get that number assigned to themselves, to that person. So today, it could be me, I've disconnected it, and tomorrow it might be you going to an operator, and you might get assigned that phone number which I had previously. So that's what recycle means. With the huge population that we have and the number of phone numbers and SIM cards that the operator demand, believe me, every operator requires, every operator is always running short of phone numbers. Numbers are infinite in terms of, yes, you could look at a permutation combination of some markets like India, whether it's a 10-digit number, what permutation you want to have. In markets like Indonesia, it could be 10, 11 digits, Singapore, it's 8 digits. However, the number series is defined by government. So for example, in Indonesia, if I were to take Indonesia as example, the number series is defined. So the first 2-3 digits will be assigned to a mobile operator. So which means the last balanced number of digits that they have will have limitations to play around with in terms of generating numbers. Secondly, operators also have, what will also happen is, because based on the combination of numbers, some numbers start looking like very premium numbers, right? So it's something like, for example, 98200 followed by 5 zeros, that suddenly becomes a very premium number, and operators then want to monetize that, sell that number for a certain rate. And that's why, although technically it's infinite, but numbers are never infinite. The phone number that's allocated, and allocation happens by regulatory. So they assign numbers in bulk. And that's why this recycle thing becomes extremely important. And yes, Jenny, it's predominantly due to the fact that it's a prepaid market, because postpaid, so if you look at the operator KPIs, the average age of a phone number, so average time duration for which a person uses postpaid number is about 36 months, while for a prepaid number, that's about 14 months. So it's a big difference. Postpaid is obviously the more ideal business. That's why for mobile operators, because they not only pay a higher tariff, but they're also there for a longer period of time. But prepaid today, customers get new exciting offers, so they can just go to the market, throw away the SIM, and start using a new SIM altogether. So we've been doing that. So we've met with some success around the world on this. We have clients today using it. So we have clients, buy now, pay later company, where, in the North US, where we help them save almost about 300K of ad loans over a year due to some of our services that you've seen. There are online marketplaces who've seen reductions of up to 55% on their chargebacks that they used to process. In India, we kind of, there were 21 million fraud transactions that we were able to stop across quite a lot of our customers there. So yes, happy to discuss if there are any challenges that you face. The TeleSign team is there, and that's how we're addressing frauds. So I'll end my presentation here, and we're kind of on the hook on the time as well. But if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer a few questions. Or if you don't have questions at this point of time, and if you feel there's something that might come back to you, feel free to reach out to me or the TeleSign team at any point of time, and I can just type in my email ID on the chat window. Feel free to drop me a note if you have any questions or any clarification on any of the things that we spoke about. Thank you. So I guess no questions. Thanks everyone for attending, and look forward to catching up with you in person sometime soon. Thank you.